what does it mean when we learn in flow of life? How can we do it while working rather than take time off working and go learning? And that's the main shift that we identified, especially for organizations to focus on when it comes to the future of learning. So if that's where we're going, then what are the shifts that we need to get there? And we identified, we did lots of research and also reflected, of course, ourselves on what we believe. But we found three main shifts that I'm going to share with you that we think needs to happen to make the flow of life, the learning in flow of life happen. And the first shift that we saw is that we need to step away from seeing learning as a separate thing, something that I go and do, something it's over there. It's a school I'm going to and learn, to having it as part of the culture. So how can you build it into the core of the organization? Into the core of how you measure progress, into the core of the company's values, and into the core of the culture. Because if the expectations from the organization is not that, then it's always about asking for permission to go and learn. It has to be part of how you work. So this is one fundamental piece for learning to be part of the culture. And another thing is to, as I said, to stop seeing it as a separate thing and to not have it as a standalone part of how you learn. So for example, it's easy to think that when you want to digitalize the way you learn, you go into what we call the tech trap, which is, okay, so we're going to digitalize learning. We buy an e-learning platform or an LMS, and then we put learning there and hope that people will go there and learn. And we speak to a lot of people like learning and development or departments and HR people, and one of the struggles that they're facing is that people are not going there to learn, or they're not finalizing the programs. And I truly strongly believe that one reason for that it's that it takes you off the flow of working, and it takes you off from the relevance and the goals that you already have in your work. So how can you use the technology and the processes and the way you do business today and integrate learning there? For example, we probably have infrastructures like a communication platform. Maybe you have started to explore Slack or Teams, the Microsoft Teams. And how can you make learning part of the way you behave and the way you communicate with each other there? Did someone say something? No? How can you knowledge share and make that into a habit? And also, for example, in all the different technologies that you use, like G Suites, where you can make sure that you have the same cloud platforms to share your experiences, the things that you've done, the data, etc. So I think this is one main shift. It's to integrate it into already existing technologies, already existing ways of working and processes, instead of separating it and seeing it as something you go and do somewhere else. And I wanted to bring up one example where I think it's been doing really, really well. Although it's a program that I'm designing and facilitating with a previous company that I work for, Hyper Island. This is a program done for TUI leadership. And what I really think it's brilliant with this program, it's a program that from the beginning was meant to be training leaders in the new type of leadership that they need to have. And they combine that with implementing the TUI strategy. So it's a blended program. So they meet from across the world and they work during 16 weeks. And the whole setup for the program is all about helping them to start acting on the strategy with the new type of leadership that they need to have. So everything is fully relevant. It's directly applicable to their context, to their teams, and to what they do. So we're working with their current challenges and stretch that to take the leap from where they want to go. And we do it in their communication platforms, in their infrastructure. So everything is happening in teams, and they start to create new habits of connecting, new habits of sharing learning, and new habits of communicating with each other, which already is having a huge impact on the way they work with their teams. And let me see, it's not working. Oh, there. And then the second shift is learning driven by learning and development and HR to learning being driven by leaders, or driven or owned by the business. And it's not to say that learning and development is taking away their responsibility, but it's becoming more of a shared responsibility. And it has to, because I would say it's impossible for learning and development to keep up with what are the things that the organizations need to learn. And it has to be part of how leaders lead. And for HR and or whoever drives learning in the organization to shift from like focusing on building, buying and delivering programs to provide tools and researches and competences and access for individuals and for leaders to take ownership of their development. So enabling, from driving learning to enabling learning. That's the biggest shift for learning and development, for HR, or for whoever is leading today development in the organization. And so would love to hear your perspectives on this. So what type of mindset or resources, tools and access do you think would empower leaders to drive learning and to lead learning with their teams? Any thoughts about how and what type of things that could actually empower them?
Should we do a little conversation now in some groups? Do you think that'll be relevant?
Yeah, good. Yeah, let's do that. We have time for it. Then we could
spark it off there.
Let's do it.
I'm going to post a question here to everyone, and I'm going to put you into some groups. So just follow the instructions that come up on the screen. You'll be in groups of 2 or 3, and then we'll give you about 7 minutes or something like that, 5 minutes. We'll give you a couple of minutes notice when we're going to bring you back. And then we can share some of the findings when we come back. So look out for the prompt to join the breakout room now. Now everyone should be back.
Yay, welcome back. We're super curious to hear what you discussed.
Yes.
We'd love to hear from at least 2 people, if anyone is keen to share.
I can share one thing that I brought up from my own experience, that working at this governmental organization, we have a lot of learning on an individual level, really, but we don't have the structure or the tools to share it. So any resource, tools, whatever that support the sharing part would help big.
Yeah.
So, and to build on each other's learning experiences. We still work very on an individual expertise level. So
would that mean both technical things such as the cloud-based infrastructures or tools like that, but also like reflection sharing kind of sessions in any types?
Yeah, both, because we work, in my case, we are all at the same place in one big open office.
Yeah.
So we have all the physical opportunities.
Yeah.
So we need a way to facilitate that and structure that and have sessions like these, and
yeah.
And combine that with digital tools.
Yeah.
Too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Maria.
Sure.
So can I just talk? I don't know.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay. So we discussed and we said that so Gustav was saying that if leaders or if a whole company is not, does not have very ambitious goals basically in for the use of technology and digitalization and the sort of the business, a strong vision for the company, then this is something that people need to actually go ahead and notice that they need to learn something. And that so he was saying, and I think we all agreed that there needs to be a strong business need for new doings.
Yeah.
You want to put it like this, combined ideally with something that where it's also, it really, if a company is still working very much on goals for the year and a follow-up, then it does need to implement learning into that, into having clear ways of measuring and following up on learning. And the last thing goes a little bit to what Maria just said. To it, finally, we had a third point, which was you need to find routines, even if it's small. Friday chat, something to have these little routines and something where an actual visible exchange of know-how or new stuff learned or experiences can be done, so that it can actually be visible to people, and it does, even if it's not necessarily linked to the current task at hand, but something new.
Yeah, I really like your point about just the meetings. Like there's so many meetings we have during the week. How can you hack those meetings and see how can we build in reflections? So reflections becomes a part of your way of working, and not to be only focusing on the next and the next and the next, but also look at what could we learn from what we did, and how can we stretch ourselves going forward or apply it going forward. So yeah.
No, and probably one point to reinforce is that about you are in charge, not you are in charge. In this area, your learning journey is about you, not about your leader. So
and for leaders to make that clear, for leaders to show that they expect that, right?
Yes.
You actually point to the next shift that we saw. But before, I would just like to share another example from another company, which I'm not working with and we are not working with, but it's Next Jump. I don't know if you heard of it, but they focus extremely, like a lot on learning and on personal growth, to your point, Gustavo. And a few things that they do to stimulate learning and to really make it clear that they expect people to learn and leaders to create that space and cultures that they reward people that helps others to learn. So they uplift those good examples when people help each other. And they let people focus their time on personal growth. Exactly how they do it, I don't know, but they say that they spend 50% of personal growth, which is a lot. But what happens when you focus on personal growth? You get engagement, motivation, and people take ownership. Another thing that they do is that they have a no-fire rule, which is that they never fire people because they're so confident in how they onboard people and how they recruit. And one part of the recruitment process and onboarding process is that people need to go through a personal leadership boot camp where they actually reflect on themselves and on their personal leadership. And people need to go through that before they get into the culture. So these are ways to secure that it's part of the culture. And to your point, Gustavo, another thing that another main shift that we need to, stimulate and enable is that shifting from learners being led, which is the typical way we look at learning, right? And in some way, that's what we're doing now, although we're really trying to make it a conversational thing. So from learners being led to learners leading learning, they need to lead their own progress and their own growth. And also, if we go to what neuroscience and psychological research says, is that one of the most important things for learning to be lasting and for learning to happen is ownership. And ownership comes from when you feel that learning is relevant, when you take time to digest your learnings and, as we talked about before, reflect on your experience and make sense of them and apply them. And this ownership can be stimulated in so many different ways. And another thing that's very important is the emotions, which means that making learning something that you experience and something that you experience with others to increase the emotions. But the key thing here that I wanted to highlight was the ownership. And how can you design your organization, and how can you, as leaders, stimulate your employees to take ownership and to reflect. In a LinkedIn research that we found when we did research, they are talking about heavy learners, and these are people that spend 5 hours a week on learning. And according to them, it's only 7% that are heavy learners. But the very interesting thing, I think, is when people are learning, when people are heavy learners, they are more motivated, they're more engaged, they're more likely to feel productive and successful and feel less stressed and more happy. And that has have a huge impact on the business. If people feel this way, if people feel motivated and engaged, and that they're growing, they take on more, they are more effective, they contribute more to the organization and to the business. So there's really strong reasons, not just from a values perspective, but also from an actual research perspective. And so one thing that's been motivating me for many, many years, as I've been reflecting a lot about how to create motivation and engagement, it's the realization that as things are changing and as it becomes more difficult to navigate complexity and things are more uncertain, we need to shift to finding that sort of clarity around what we want to learn and how we can feel more confident at work and in life. Trickles down to the self-awareness of what you want. Like what you want in your life, what you care about, your values, how you want to grow, etc. What's your purpose? So this is just an example. This is a tool that I developed, but it's just an example that of one of many tools that can help people to do that. And today I was part of a pod about creating engagement for lifelong learning, and she asked me, if you were the minister of engagement in Sweden, what would you do? And I actually said that I would somehow magically help people to be aware of what they want and how they want to grow, and help them to live that life. Because if we do, we have more happy people going to work, less stressed people, and less burnout. And I think also, most of all, I think we have better solutions for the society and for our businesses. So this is also a training program that we at Colearn do. I see that there are comments. Sveinu, please, or anyone else, please share if there are things that you want to build on. Because maybe, can I?
Yeah, a couple of comments now, just around.
I can open them up, sorry, yeah.
Around get the resources afterwards and that kind of thing. But no big builds at the moment.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay, so moving on to asking you what you think, how might we learn while working? Any ideas or thoughts of what we could do? How can we make learning as part of the flow of working?
I don't think I have the answer, but I just want to reflect on the first part with the reward to help others to learn.
Yeah.
Because we have that in our yearly feedback loop that we have once a year, by the way. We should have feedback more than that. And we talk about that. How have you helped others to learn? So that's a good thing. Yeah, but we don't have the other, we don't have something to support that. So we get reviewed or rewarded on it, but we don't have the structure for it. So that would be a start. So, okay, I want to help, but how can I do that in my daily work? So, and that's a culture thing too. That I have something to learn my colleagues. So, yeah, so that was not an answer. It was a reflection.
That's a great reflection.
Yeah.
And also the what do you say? The most effective way to learn is actually help others to learn.
Definitely.
Any other? Label daily working activities that are learning activities. Then we focus. Oh, interesting. Yeah. So could you give an example, Carl? That would be really good. No, and maybe someone else do. Or you have other perspectives. But it's an interesting thing, because how we label things change the way we perceive it. So it's an interesting perspective.
I have a bit of an example of one that I'm not sure was executed very well, but I think their heart was in the right place. And it was at Staples, that when I worked in the US in their corporate office, and they made learning part of their scorecard. So every store had a scorecard and had a target around learning hours. And that was a fairly efficient way to signal that learning was as important as the other things that were on their scorecard. So, they had sales, they had new customer, they had some marketing efforts as well. I'm trying to remember what else was on there. There's at least 5 or 6 things that were on the scorecards. It was delightful to see learning on there. The execution of it was a little wonky. So I think that they saw learning as something that happens outside of the sales floor, that you go to, we sometimes call it a dark dungeon, a room in the back where you sit and you look at something that's in Cornerstone that was the LMS at that time, and you've done your learning bit, check mark. But not only address if you look at 70-20-10, just the 10%, and it doesn't value learning as anything else other than taking a course and learning in an LMS or attending a class. So that's why I say it's like a half of an effort. So the good thought there was that it was part of their scorecard. So they knew that it was valuable. Things changed really quickly in retail, and they needed associates to kind of be up to date. But I think that we can probably execute that quite differently.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So it's part of sort of the expectation, and it's become clear that it's okay to learn and it's important to learn. Yeah. But yeah, you can do it differently. You can do everything differently, right? It can be different executions.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
So what we would like to do now, because 1 hour goes short, we could probably spend many, many hours together and hear more of your experience and all our experience and thoughts and ways of actually making these shifts happen. But it's been a bit of a like input, and one key, as we've been talking about, for learning to happen is to make sure that we reflect and digest. So that's what we would like to do now. It's for you to actually take time and reflect on the session today. Before that, I just would like to summarize a few things that we think is important to make these shifts happen. And one is to make sure that learning is part of the direction and the values and the culture of the company, and the way you measure progress. That you equip leaders to be facilitators of learning in the way of being, in the way that they actually work with their teams. And that the individuals take ownership of their learning. And that we embed learning in our internal communication, in our infrastructures, in our work habits and meeting habits, and in processes, to make sure that after a project, we always review. When we set goals, we make sure that we set goals that help us and push us to learn and to go outside of our comfort zone. That we uplift good examples. So in every organization, we have people that are really curious, that are really out there, and that could be the influencers in the organization. So uplift them, give space for them, enable them to share, and inspire the organizations to do the same. It can be anyone in the organization. And yeah, work with people, followers that care about learning, and enable them to pass it forward. And then, of course, to role model it yourself. And that's what we will do now. It's going to give you a few minutes to think about your takeaways as a tool to reflect. And 4 different things. So what ideas or mental models do you take with you from the session now? Any tools or practices that you would like to try going forward? Or any examples and stories that was mentioned that you want to remember and maybe do something with? Or questions that you got, or things that you want to explore going forward? And then ending with what is one action that you will take based on those takeaways? So reflect on that, and we'll share after in a few minutes. So maybe 3 minutes for you to reflect on those. And I would recommend you to write it down, since it helps the brain to process. Repeat. I love that action. Look at recording, review, and reflect. Research, learning and curating case studies like TUI and NextJump to inform my practice. Great. Take more time to reflect. Research on NextJob and Active Learning Center. Steel case sounds like 2 great best practices. Yes. Be learner and tell stories about my own learnings. That's a really good one as well. Personal canvas thing. That was the first time. Yeah, just reach out if you want. There are also other tools, but I'm happy to share the one that we're doing. My action is not to sit down and wait. More your own responsibility of your own learning. Yes. Incorporate reflection with the student group I'm working with right now, tomorrow. Yes. Great. We have the answers, but how do we manage culture change? Have to think about that. Yeah, that's a big one. So good to think about that. Brainstorm ideas on how we can help learners focus on their learning experience and not put out fires and work on the day-to-day tasks at the same time. Make a webinar similar to this. Great. Pod meetings with leaders, maybe using Zoom, about changing learning and how they can add value in the process. Great. Lots of good, juicy stuff coming up.
Fantastic. Great. We're happy to share. We'll share a recording of this. You can also get a link to the results, so you could steal someone else's actions after this. But we're gonna keep our word and stick to the hour. So this was our way of checking out. But we'll follow up with a couple of messages. If you liked what you did today, feel free to join the next one, and make sure to invite a colleague and send this link their way. Also, if you're interested in and connecting to talk more about our findings in the research, but also our work and what we do, feel free. We'd love to talk more and learn more about what you're up to and how you're driving these questions. And then lastly, we have a community. You find it on our website, colearn.education, on the community section there, which you'll meet peers like this, but also about 200-300 unders who are sharing and engaging and exploring these topics on an ongoing basis. So with that, I think we want to say thank you and see you on the internet.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Very good to see you. Looking forward to connect.
Yes. Bye.
Bye-bye.